So today I was given a topic that we're going to discuss, and the topic was the importance of good advertising and driving the business objectives of a client's brand. And when I first heard that, I thought, wow, that's quite a mouthful, and that's something that we've always found pretty obvious, you know, creativity and how it works. And I think when I investigated a little bit more, and I realized that, you know, what we're always trying to do is find that link between creativity and effectiveness. And it's always a tough one to do. So we have brought other people in. You want to listen to me all the time. And we've got quite a nerve-wracking panel for me, only because two of these men I have seen talk live before, and I was completely blown away by them. We've got Keith Weed, who is the Chief Marketing and Communications Manager of the whole of Unilever. We have John O'Keefe, who is the worldwide CD of WPP. I mean, that's just the whole world, there's no bigger. And we've got James Herman, and I've just recently finished his book, A Case for Creativity, and it really is quite incredible and does set quite a case. So we will be talking a little bit more. If I can just set the topic, and then we can hand over to the panel that have joined us. And I think when I was considering the link and how I was going to open up and talk about the topic, the link for me was something that became very clear when I read something that BBH have stated, and they really set it quite clearly in terms of effectiveness and strategy. And what they say is, our objective is effectiveness, our strategy is creativity. And I've kind of always known that. But it's never been put that beautifully before, that actually, to get effective results, we use a strategy, and that strategy is creativity. And I think there's two things we have to consider here. The one thing is that we're not just talking from the creative point of view, we're also talking from the marketer's point of view. And the one thing that hit me in the face was when I read something and it told me that there were two types of marketers. There's a type of marketer that's in it to win it, and there's a type of marketer that's in it not to lose. And when we're presenting to clients, we need to establish exactly who we're presenting to, and what we mean by in it to win it is they take high risk, and they take for high rewards and win big, and in it not to lose is take lower risks. For lower results still works, but it's something that it's not going to be as risky, and it minimizes the risk of losing. But the nature of a creative idea is something that calls for being original. It calls for being different and unique and compelling. So in itself, that is quite uncomfortable, and that feels risky. And how do we prove something like that? It's hard. And what we're going to do, and especially in the case for creativity, is it takes a whole lot of past campaigns, and it puts the awards that it's won next to the effectiveness of that. And one brilliant campaign, and I'm going to hand over, one brilliant campaign, it actually won this year at Cannes, for the guys that were there, but this year at Cannes, it won the Creative Effectiveness Award. I don't know if you know it. It's the Axe campaign by Unilever. And I think this would be a great time, Keith, if we could please ask you. I mean, that Axe campaign just blew us all away. It got a great response in Cannes when we were there. It didn't just win the Creative Effectiveness Award that's only been around for the last 2 years at Cannes. It just cleaned up. How well did that campaign do for you?
It did very well, and hello to all of you. I'm pleased to say that I'm a great believer in exactly what you said earlier about creativity as a way to drive effectiveness. Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is, of course, build our brands, and Axe, as it's known around the world, or Lynx in some markets, is a very large and successful brand for us. But I'm pleased to say that wasn't the only winner. I mean, I must admit, if I was going to win an award, I'd love to win the Creative Effectiveness Award. But we actually tripled the numbers of lions we had in Cannes this year, and it was a real sort of step change for us. I think it sort of captures what we've been trying to do in Unilever, is to think differently about how we develop and how we use creativity and how we develop communication in what is a very cluttered world. I'd argue you need creativity now more than ever, with all the different choices people have to watch the moving picture, whether it be on their iPad, their TV, etc. And creativity needs to sort of cut through that clutter.
And how do you, as a large corporation, this is in 2010, you were sitting with Sir Martin Sorrell, I remember, at the debate, and there's something you said there, and I would look back on my phone because I was tweeting, and there was one tweet that I read, and it says that creativity turns products into super brands. And you certainly have turned so many of your products into super brands, and I just don't understand how such a large business like Unilever can really, how do your systems, how do you prevent all your systems in such a large business taking away from the originality of ideas that are presented to you?
Well, firstly, most importantly, you have to work with great creatives like John. And I've worked with John over many years obviously in his current role, but before he has a past as well. And funny enough, in the very company you're talking about that also did those Axe commercials in BBH. So I think what you need to do is you need to work with the best. It's like playing a sport. If you want to win in football, you put a lot of good players on your football team. And I think that's true in business. If you want to win, you've got to have the best people. Put the people on the team and then give them permission to do their very best. And do you know what? You'd be surprised how often they do. Most people come to work to do a great job. But a lot of people then sort of aim off because of all the restrictions around them. And what I'm keen to do is to encourage people to do their very best, whether that be within Unilever, but of course within the agencies and the production teams behind that.
John,
yep.
If I could ask you a question, I mean, coming from that WPP have won 2 years in a row now. They've won the Creative Holding Company of the Year, Cannes. That's a lot of awards to win. And how they, just so you know, the people at home and here, how you win that is they take all the points that you've won and all the Cannes, all the awards, they put it together, and then the holding company that's come out tops is WPP. How do you go about measuring and how as the worldwide CD, what do you use to measure the performance of your global office? Do you use just awards?
No, and I've said, and you know, those who know me will have heard me say this many times over many years, that awards should be considered happy accidents after you've done everything else right. You know, Lynx or Axe, for example, is brilliantly marketed and has been for many years. The reason for the brilliant marketing is to create a huge brand and to create sales and success. Thereafter, if Cannes or the Loeries or D&AD or anybody else wants to hand you an award, you know, that's a lovely thing to get, but you've got to make sure that you get the day job right. So, you know, I think within WPP we've got, you know, vast numbers of people, obviously, and as Keith says, people get up in the morning and try to do a great job because otherwise life would be very dull. And I think we've focused a little bit in the last, since I've joined WPP, we've focused on a little bit more on the creative reputation of WPP, because I don't think it lacked creativity. I just think it lacked the focus that, you know, it's very easy to get distracted into dozens and dozens of award shows. So I think focusing on Cannes as the single biggest, the kind of the world championships, if you like, has given us something to benchmark ourselves against. And as you say, it's been gratifying the last couple of years to be number one. But, you know, I always say to people, you know, don't obsess about it. You know, do the right thing for your clients, and the rest will follow. And
John, do you, with you selling in so many award-winning campaigns, is it that you've just got these clients that are in it to win it clients, or did it take quite some time to change the clients from in it not to lose to in it to win it? How do you make your clients feel comfortable about being uncomfortable?
Well, I don't set out in the mornings to make people uncomfortable, and I think, Keith's point is well made. That it's on both sides. You want to put it, both sides of the fence. People are trying to do a great job because, again, to reiterate, there'll be a lot of reiteration, I suspect, today. Everybody is surrounded by distraction, and there are many, many, many things you could focus on during the day. So if you're going to be in the marketing business, you better make sure that your message is relevant, engaging, something that stops people in their tracks. And the best relationships and the best marketing comes from those relationships. It's when it's more of a partnership than a kind of an agency-client thing, where you get to be, everybody sits together around the table and gets the job done to the best possible effect. And, a stranger coming into the room wouldn't really know where the agency stopped and the client began. That's where you get the best results, I think.
Keith, if I can ask you one question. When agencies present to you, do you feel that they really get your business? Are they just coming in and presenting creative, or do they give you a solid case? Do they really understand what you need?
Well, the good ones, yes, because at the end of the day, for a brand, you need a product to buy and an idea to buy into. And so what we want to do is make sure that at the end of the day, people get great products. You don't go and buy a product again and again if it's not a great product. So I think it's important for the agencies to understand, what the product is, how it actually works, what's the science behind it, and to really understand the product and then the brand in that order. But then ultimately, it's the idea to buy into, and that's the bit that really differentiates commodities and brands and creates an opportunity to build something really special.
I thought what was really interesting when we were trying to tie this link together with creativity and effectiveness, that this whole book is based on two award shows. James, if I'm the author of The Case for Creativity, I found it interesting that we're trying to say that creative work and creativity is a strategy to effectiveness. Then why are there two award shows? Why is there an effective award show and a creative award show? You don't get the Oscars for the most money made and then the Oscars for the best creative films.
Yeah, hi, hey everyone. I'm going to try and make some sense. It's the middle of the night here in New Zealand. I think, yeah, it's a really good question. Why do we have effectiveness awards and creative awards and separated them out like that? The way that I kind of think about it, I think effectiveness awards show, they celebrate what was effective last year. I think creative awards actually celebrate what will be effective next year. I think a lot of the time, creative awards allow us to look at kind of what the most original thinking is in the world. And often that thinking, often it does happen around the edges. And often our industry then takes that thinking and brings it into the middle and brings it on to sort of the, bigger campaigns for brands, learns from the most original thinking, learns from the newest kind of methods, and then uses that and sort of, blows that out, takes it to something much bigger, and that campaign ends up becoming, an effectiveness award winner down the track. And I think creative awards have a really important role in our industry in terms of inspiring where the industry is going, and effectiveness awards have a really important role in recognizing where the industry has been and what has been effective in the past.
Many times we've heard we walk into a room or we're in an agency and somebody says to us, are you just trying to be too creative? Or are you just trying to win awards? What are your thoughts on that? If we can start with Keith, and then we'll move over to John and then James.
Okay, look, let's be clear. I'm with John. There's nothing wrong with winning awards, but that isn't the starting point. So the starting point is to do great bits of communication that engage consumers in a relevant way and build your brand. Now, I'm pleased to say there is a link between creativity and effectiveness, because if you do the same adding up of points you did for WPP on the most awarded holding company in Cannes, and did the same for a brand advertiser, that you would then get the same brand advertiser who's also the #1 in the FE Effectiveness Awards, which happens to be the one behind me. So we can be the #1 in creativity and effectiveness at the same time. So I think the notion that awards is a bad thing should be sort of swept away. But what we should talk about, though, is when you get to that situation where you've done a great bit of creative work. I think it's fantastic if you can then recognise that and celebrate it with awards. So to me, awards are milestones of excellence rather than an objective in its own right. And what's really exciting is when you end up with a big brand like a Dove or an Omo or an Axe, as we were talking before. That's the real reward. John.
Thank you so much. How slick. You know, I mean, I don't know if it's a brand in South Africa, but EasyJet is an airline in the UK. And it regularly runs press ads and print and poster that say things like Nice, £9. Now, it would be wrong of EasyJet to do anything else, given that it can get you to Nice for £9. It's never going to beat that. It shouldn't try and do something that's going to win a Lion at Cannes or a Loerie or anything else, because it would be doing itself a disservice. Few brands are like that. So, as Keith says, the holy grail and the thing that makes life the most interesting is when you get to work on something like Dove or Omo or Axe, and I've worked on all three. When they have a kind of a mission above and beyond the product itself. You know, Johnny Walker would be the same, you know, a mission around progress. That's where you get to interesting territories and you start to win awards, as I say, as happy accidents when you've got sales going through the roof on all those brands and people have got something to believe in and understand what they stand for. That's kind of what makes the job the most interesting. But there are product stroke brands, you know, it becomes a moot point, that have, you know, as I say, a very low costs, something to offer. So that's what you say. You don't expect to win awards for it, but it's the right thing to do.
And James?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when you get that, you know, that comment, you know, you're being too creative or you're just trying to win an award, I think, you know, I think most of the time it's probably less to do with the ad that's on the table and more to do with the relationship, you know, between the agency and the client. It's probably more symptomatic of a client who kind of wonders whether the agency's got its best interests at heart. And I think you know, there's a lot to be said for, you know, I guess stepping back at that point and asking, why do you think that of us? And really trying to understand each other a little bit better. And I think sometimes agencies, you know, don't work nearly hard enough to reassure their clients that actually they are interested in their business, they are interested in the results. And, you know, like the BBH quote says, they're using creativity as a strategy to get to those results. So, you know, there's you know, always great things come of kind of having a relationship where the client really believes that you're kind of in it for the right reasons. And then when you do the really creative stuff, you know, they know that's coming from a great place.
Now, James, now that you have proven the case for creativity, do you find it easy to get clients to accept this?
Yeah, I mean, surprisingly easy. I think there's now such a mountain of evidence to support that, you know, creativity is the right thing to do, and it's, you know, creatively awarded work tends to be more effective. That it's, you know, it's not hard, and there are certainly still, you know, there is still kind of, you know, hard line clients who really, you know, for one reason or another, you know, remain really skeptical. It's hard to turn them, but, you know, the majority, particularly of senior clients in major marketing organizations nowadays, you know, I think have all come round to it, you know, not just from my book, but from the work that, you know, a ton of researchers have done over the last 10 years. And I think, you know, now when you've got organizations like Keith's organization, Unilever and Coca-Cola, you know, employing creative excellence people and putting real money into making sure the work that comes out of their agencies is brilliant creative work. And, you know, when you've got other organizations like P&G for a long time now really kind of looking at Cannes and valuing Cannes, you know, it's nowadays it's, you know, it really is a bit of an old school view that that creativity is, you know, not an effective thing to do, or that we shouldn't sort of chase a greater degree of creativity in our marketing. So nowadays, I think it's becoming, you know, there's such a weight of evidence both in the data and also the decisions of senior clients at major marketing organizations, that it's, you know, it's not a hard sell anymore.
John,
Yeah.
what are the key ingredients to producing creative solutions globally and sustaining that over many years, and for the clients for your clients with so many different requirements?
Well, you take a pinch of. It's a very difficult question, because there are no in marketing in general, and specifically here, there isn't an answer I can give that you say, well, I'll apply that to every client I ever deal with from here on, and it'll always go brilliantly well. You know, I mean, differences of opinion. You know, I think this is terribly creative, and the client thinks it's hopeless, or vice versa. You know, you've just got to fight the good fight, I suppose, and try to, you know, be on the best of terms with your clients and try to engender good relationships so that you can have those conversations, you can have those disagreements. I think that's the important thing, to be able to disagree and not fall out. Ultimately, if you can have that sort of relationship, then you can get to a place beyond, you know, making one or two missteps to a great campaign or a great solution. But there is no kind of, here are the 5 things to follow, here are the 5 ingredients, and it will always be great if you just do these things. If it were that easy, you know, there'd be a lot more of us doing it.
Keith, you know, we mentioned earlier that, you know, clients that are in it to win it, and you certainly are that. And what I'd really like to know is, what do you think's the biggest risk you've taken when you've heard a creative idea and you thought, okay, this does feel a bit risky, but I'm going to do it? Can you remember which campaign that was with?
Wow, that's a big question. I have to confess, it's been a long time since I have been really hands-on leading a piece of creative work. So I'm going to have to go back a few years. Right now, we produce about 1,500 commercials a year, and although I'm involved in them, I'm not leading them. So I'd have to wind back, I suppose, to when I was probably running deodorants, and it'd be that good old brand. Lynx, as it was called in the UK, or Axe globally, and we frequently had to take risks to keep it fresh and alive. And I think a big challenge is how you keep reinventing a brand which is essentially a youth brand, but it's a youth brand that was launched in the early 80s. Can you think about how many youth brands are still alive that are over 30 years old? So I think that reinvention means you continually have to take risks, but I think you take the risks together, you and the agency together, and that way I think you make things happen. Because you know, taking a risk and then just throwing it out there and not having the follow through can be dangerous both for you and the agency. So I'm with John about the idea of having good relationships, which enables you to do that. I think investing in good relationships is hugely important in advertising, and often underrated, because if you trust someone, you're more willing to listen to them and give them the benefit of the doubt. And if you don't, you're more willing to sort of question what their motivation is and whether they've really done their homework, etc. So even before you get to creating risky and great work, I would first make sure you have a good relationship. Having said that, I can think of some disastrous ads I've done of taking a risk, and using the Lynx one. I was launching Lynx razors in the UK with a very innovative ad. I'm sure you can still find it on YouTube, about a young lady who wasn't using a Lynx razor striking the match for a cigarette underneath her arm to light the cigarette of her boyfriend. I have to say that ad didn't do too well, and nor did Lynx razors. So there's two sides of risk.
I was nothing to do with that ad.
John, just going on Keith's point, what do you do to make your relationships better with clients? Do you have any tricks of the trade?
No, because I think if there were tricks of the trade, they'd very quickly be seen as tricks of the trade. I always send them a box of chocolates. Here comes the O'Keefe box of chocolates. He won't pull that one again. I mean, most people, most of the time, are reasonably nice people. There are dishonourable exceptions, but it is do the right thing and understand their business and don't waste their time, and vice versa. Clients these days are much smarter in terms of 30 odd years ago, which predates me slightly. People were saying that your client would be. I remember Saatchi's doing a fantastic ad for Real Fires, and the client were literally miners. And they would come down and say, "Well, you're the agency. You know what to do. Whatever you say, we'll just buy it." It isn't like that anymore. So clients are smart, and if you try and pull the wool over their eyes, or you haven't done your homework, you'll be seen through pretty immediately, and you'll deserve it. So if you do the right thing, you work hard, you try to understand the pressures and stresses that the clients are under. Because when you talk about taking risks, the risks are much greater for the client than they are for the agency, and people should understand that. It's millions and millions of dollars worth of research and investment and development of products. And here's my great idea. I haven't really thought it through, but I really think you should buy this. And if they do, and it comes a cropper, the agency can usually kind of walk away and find another client or something else to do. The client, a lot of the risk, most of the risk is on the client side, and that's something everyone should always try to bear in mind.
I think, James, after reading your book, I did feel a lot more comfortable about presenting ideas, and I know we would all take a lot of the facts and cases from your book and quote them in presentations. I think there's going to be studies and stuff taken from the case for creativity to prove many campaigns. What do you think, if we had to take one case and put it in our pocket for every presentation, what would that case or fact be?
I guess probably two answers to that question. I mean, one, probably the one fact, that's the most compelling, I think, is, the work that Peter Field did in the UK with the IPA, where he showed that creatively awarded campaigns were 11 times more efficient than non-creatively awarded campaigns. I think that's one that, that's a fact that tends to resonate a lot, particularly in times when, budgets are being squeezed and money's tough, because it's a real, it's an ROI fact. It's a point that says you'll get more bang for your buck if you employ a more creative approach. And I think that's really quite compelling to be able to go in and say, you can spend, either less money, media money, or the same, and get a lot more out of this campaign because it's much more creative. But in saying that, I think going into a creative presentation armed with kind of facts on why you should buy a more creative piece of work, I'm not sure necessarily that's the best approach. I kind of think that I sort of hear these stories of kind of great Saatchi and Saatchi suits from the 1980s who could kind of sell anything to any client in a meeting. In my experience, it actually starts like way before that. And I think, if we can get clients walking into the agency asking for more creative work in the first place, so well before the creative presentation, you've sold them on the case for creativity, then, I think we've got a much better chance of selling more creative work once we get to the presentation. So I'd say, although there are probably great facts to pull out in the presentation, my bias would be to kind of use them a bit earlier in the relationship.
Actually, on that one, you talk a lot about whether the clients create the right atmosphere for creativity. I can remember when I was VP of marketing, going to an agency and having sort of two agencies, one where I would go and be ready to buy and be excited and know I was going to see something innovative and interesting, and really had the excitement of going to the meeting. I had another agency I went to where I sort of was slightly dreading what I might see and knowing I was under time pressure and I had to get the project out. So I think it's also both ways. Agencies can create an atmosphere and a relationship where clients are willing to buy, and equally, right the opposite, a fear of dread that you are going to see something that you're then going to have to work out how on earth you might save it. And that conditions, I think, a lot of the way that people react to the work they see.
I think
How do you think an agency can create more of what... Sorry, go, John.
I was going to say, it's also, there's this sort of slight misnomer running through this conversation, I guess, that clients and indeed agencies, there are clients who come along saying, don't try and give me any of that creative stuff. I'm really, really not comfortable with that. Can I have something quite dull and boring and safe? And agencies go, well, you've come to the right place. You know, a lot of this is people trying to do great creative work, maybe not doing their homework right. Sometimes it was good on paper, but in production, you know, a ball was dropped or something. It's a very, very, you know, you're kind of 10% of the way there when you've got a great idea and the client has bought into it. You've really, really then got to mind your P's and Q's and make sure that you deliver it. You find the right partners to make sure it lives off the page. I don't think there are too many, as I say, people saying, just rustle me up something quite dreary, I'll be in on Thursday, I'm that kind of a client, or I'm that kind of an agency. It's, you know, there's that aspect of it we're not really touching, where we've just got to make sure that, you know, we find the right people and we get great work and great directors and great things done, and we don't drop balls at the, you know, after the event.
And James, you know, we were talking about earlier when we dropped off about advertising poker, and I would love to come back to that question in terms of how do you think? Do you have like a percentage where you go this many ads, like an 80-20 split? Do you have a split that out of all the creative campaigns that have been made and presented, how many of those will be highly, and we're only talking highly effective?
You mean in my experience, or in all of the research?
In all of the research.
Yeah. I think, I mean, various studies come out with various different numbers. I mean, I think the most compelling, the most compelling research is probably what I mentioned earlier, Peter Field's stuff that sort of shows that, you can plot on a line, according to spend, how efficient sort of creatively awarded campaign will be at driving an effectiveness result. And that line is actually, it's extremely predictable. And in fact, what he managed to show was that a more creative approach is not only sort of higher return, it's also lower risk, because you can actually predict you predict the effectiveness of a more creative campaign much more with much more certainty than you can an uncreative campaign, which was really interesting. I don't know whether there's ever sort of an easy way to go 20% of creative campaigns don't work and 80% do. I think when you sort of look at it all on balance, what people tend to find is that the more creative ones are much more likely to achieve a great result than the less creative ones.
And how did the book come about? How did you think one day I want to create this case of creativity? Do you have a story? Did something happen where you said, I'm just tired of this, let me go ahead and prove something and create this case to help creativity?
When I got into my role as head of planning at Colenso BBDO, which was the last agency that I worked at, I kind of started by wondering, how am I going to lead this planning department? Where am I going to have them focus their energies? Because I think as a planner, you can really focus on not only trying to get the strategy right, but doing that in a way that fosters great work as well. Really bonding with the creative department and really trying to do planning in a way that makes the work better. Or you can do planning in a way that actually doesn't sort of focus on that, and it focuses on the research and the more technical aspects of strategy and leaves the creative up to the creative department. And I'd kind of I'd worked in agencies that had leaders that were, massive advocates of creativity, other agencies that had leaders that were actually, had a much more pragmatic approach. and they both, both type of leaders seem to run quite a successful agency. So I kind of found myself, wondering, I want to be able to kind of prove who's right and which direction I point my planners. And I started sort of digging around, trying to find, some evidence of, and at that point it was actually quite hard to find. And so I did a study of my own. I looked at the world's most creatively awarded agencies. I looked at the less creatively awarded agencies. I compared their performance at effectiveness award shows and found that the most creatively awarded agencies won on average 2.5 times as many effectiveness awards. And that's where it kind of started. So that was the sort of first study I did. And then over the next 4 years, I found 14 other studies that dug into, asked the same question, really, how do we compare more creative and less creative agencies or campaigns or companies? And they all, what was really compelling is every single one of those research studies reached the same conclusion, that a more creative approach is a much more effective one. And in all my time, I've never seen one study that's even suggested that a less creative approach is more effective.
And I think we only have a little bit of time left, and I'd love to just ask you all one question. It's something we were discussing a little earlier, and we all, from the agency side, we go and we pitch to clients. If creativity is the strategy to effectiveness, and it is so important, and it's the agencies that are coming up with creativity and they have the know-how and the knowledge, do you ever think that there could be a shift where clients pitch to creative agencies to get the business? Do you ever think there is it possible of that switch?
Depends who's paying.
No, I think is the short answer on that one.
Okay, then it's all over for us, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today in the Google Plus Hangout. And we all really appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Cheerio. Bye.
Thank you. Yeah.